this event, and you know, like, well, I think we did one in here, so I ran downstairs, got the catering manager.
He sent me videos and photos.
And said, let's hold it here. So that's why we're here tonight, because I only wanted to be able to walk home after the event. So just a little background. Procurement Talks is really a neat little combination of about a half a dozen providers in this space who want to give back to the community and allow people in a non-selling environment. Nobody sold to anybody tonight, right?
No.
Right? Give everybody a chance to network. Give everybody a chance to hear some new best practices of things that are out there, and just exchange ideas. And so we all fund this. We all kind of chip in some money to make it happen. A lot of you volunteer your time to present back to the group, so thank you all of our speakers for doing that. It means a lot to us. And we take it on the road. So we're here tonight. We are going to New York next month.
17th in New York, if
Right.
anyone's going to be in Manhattan area.
And it's really a nice trend. My background is procurement. So I spent 15 years in the procurement industry, and then the last 15 years as a provider. And I always like to say there's 1 degree of separation in this industry. There truly is. I could talk to anybody in this industry and find a connection that you have to one other person that I know within 5 minutes. That's why it's important to give back into this industry, for sure. I get calls all the time saying, hey, I'm looking for a job, do you know who's looking? And I drop everything I'm doing and I start flipping through, and I look for opportunities to help that person find a job. I also then get calls from companies that are looking to hire, saying, do you know a good so-and-so? And I return that as well too. So,
AKA Roger's a good headhunter.
yes. And I don't charge on either side. I just like to make people happy. One of our customers is Walmart, and their CPO on the indirect side said, you know anybody that's good at this? And within a half a day, I had 6 resumes in front of him for people for each individual category that he was looking for, just because I knew all the right people. He probably would have spent $250,000 on headhunting fees alone that day, just trying to find those people. But it's just, again, connections in this space. So I encourage everybody, the theme is connect. Everyone should connect with everybody here on LinkedIn. Everybody should be active, helping one another out when everyone needs help. Right now it's a good environment. Everybody's doing well job-wise, but you never know. And so, Intertrade, just real quickly, we're a source to pay provider. I like to refer to ourselves as the sort of the unknown provider in the space. We are on the Gartner Magic Quadrant, the Forest Wave Report, and all those wonderful reports that are out there. We grew up in Europe. That's where our headquarters is. That's why we're very well known over there. My job is to build the U.S. business. So we have customers like Google, like Walmart, like the World Bank, and others that we've built pretty quickly in the last couple of years. So afterwards, if you want to connect with me, I'm happy to give you a card, but I don't want to do it now. My one ask of everybody is when we have these panels, engage. Ask questions. This group loves to be asked questions, so it hates to just talk the whole time. So my ask of everybody is just connect. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah. Again, thanks everybody. I know you had a lot of things that you could be doing on this Wednesday night. So thanks for spending it with us in lovely Chambly. If anybody has any Chambly questions, interested in moving to Chambly,
He's also a tour guide.
Yeah, ask me. I'm happy to introduce you to all things Chambly. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. So before we kick off our superstar panel, I actually asked Greg to join us. He is from Supply Chain Now. Anyone here familiar with Supply Chain Now in the audience? All right, a couple of you. And they have a really, really interesting podcast. So if you are a podcaster, if it's something you like to listen to at work or on your commute, I would recommend checking out their publication. And they do a lot in the digital and content space. And they have an awards ceremony that they're doing next month, and they need more applicants. So I asked him to come talk about the awards and some of the things that they're doing, because I think this is a great audience to recognize people doing outstanding things in our industry. So with that,
thank you.
have Greg come up.
Hey, I've also been here recently. So I have a friend who has a band called the Sun Dogs, and they played here on Mother's Day. Will Haraway and the Sun Dogs, or the Haraway brothers. They've got like 3 bands. I gotta tell you, it was easier to find parking when those guys had a concert than it was at a procurement conference. So don't feel slighted if you're in the procurement industry. I'm not, actually, technically. I came from purchasing, which is the what we call strategic inventory side of insult that you all receive in procurement. So I'm down with the issues that you guys have, and I really appreciate what everyone does. I had some great conversations with folks already. So, yes, I'm Greg with Supply Chain Now. Yes, we do a podcast. No, I don't do it in my boxer shorts and a t-shirt or in my mother's basement. We actually have a studio. If you're familiar with another hip part of town, West Midtown, we do it at the King Plow Arts Center. So come by and see us anytime. You're a lot less likely to get murdered on that part of town now than you used to be. It's actually quite beautiful. You really should come see it if you haven't been there lately. So Atlanta Supply Chain Awards, this is, oh, thank you so much.
You've got your slide up ready.
So this is something that we sponsor every year, and this year it's at Modex. So Modex is a big material handling conference at the Georgia World Congress Center the 9th through the 12th. On the 10th is the Atlanta Supply Chain Awards. Anyone want to guess what our URL is?
Atlanta Supply Chain Awards.
Very good, you've been there.
I'll be there this year.
So anyway, what we do is celebrate supply chain achievement in what we love to call, and we've convinced the Metro Atlanta Chamber to call Supply Chain City. So we're very proud of Atlanta's supply chain heritage. I'm not a native, I'm a transplant. I'm a carpetbagger, I'm a Yankee, whatever you want to call it. But I'm so happy to be here, and I feel like there is a lot, and we've seen a lot of momentum in this city. If you think about it, package software was invented in Atlanta, Peachtree Software with Management Science Associates. We've got UPS, Home Depot, Coca-Cola, you know, you guys all know.
We got someone, Home Depot's represented here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We just interviewed your Vice President of Transportation, Michelle Livingstone, the other day on the show. So what we do is we try to highlight people in the supply chain industry and share what's boring and not boring about supply chain. Yes, I do get the question a lot. You have a supply chain podcast? I do. And people listen to it. They do. So anyway, the Atlanta Supply Chain Awards is our sort of give back to the industry. We want to share who's doing great things, particularly in the Atlanta area, the 29 county Atlanta Metroplex. 29 counties. Okay, I don't think there are many cities in America, maybe not another one that has that. So if you have facilities, offices, one sales rep in the Metro Atlanta area, you are eligible to nominate your company for a number of awards. And one in particular that's relevant to this group is the Sourcing Excellence Award. So as it turns out, I bet you can guess, we don't have enough nominations for that. Nominations close February 15th, which is a Saturday, so like the IRS, I am on your side. And I'm going to let you submit until February 17th, which is my middle daughter's birthday. So if you would include a happy birthday Delaney in your nomination, I'll make sure that you win. But yeah, sure.
How about if we all help you promote it? Meaning, I think one of our to-dos
Yes,
should be an
please.
email from you. Would everybody mind receiving an email about the award
Yes.
and at least promote it
So-
on LinkedIn and
We'll
social
send
media?
a link in our follow-up that
Yep.
has the application, so you can easily click on it and nominate people.
Yeah, that'd be great. And thank you very much.
Sure.
And Sarah has been gracious enough to promote us some on LinkedIn. We're on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. Not kidding. People are doing business on Instagram. I know that sounds crazy, and it's not just Patrick Mahomes selling jerseys. Go Chiefs. There's a lot. There's a lot going on at this thing. There are a number of awards. If you know somebody who's particularly good in warehousing and transportation, we could use some more nominations there. We'd really appreciate it. Georgia World Congress Center, March 10th, Atlanta Supply Chain Awards. Thank you.
I have
very
one more
much.
comment
Yes,
for you.
any questions?
So, true fact, does anybody know why, with the exception of Fulton County, each county in the state of Georgia is so small? Does anybody know?
Gerrymandering?
Any from around here?
Nope. A county has to be no more than 1 day's mule ride from one end to the other.
Is that right?
Yes.
Wow.
Fast
There you
fact.
go.
That's why, except for Fulton County, you need to be able to cross the entire county in a mule in 1 day.
Who's going to try that out? Can anyone source us a mule?
Moscow mule.
I live in Cumming.
There we go. That is going to be a slow ride, let me tell you. All right, any other questions?
And Greg, you'll be around a few minutes after.
I will.
People want to chat and get
Yes,
information
because the
about
bar
the
is still open. Oh.
Did everybody get
Yeah.
their drink ticket? One last drink ticket while we're. Anybody want a drink ticket?
We can source drink tickets also.
Yes. All right.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
You, Greg. Thank you. All right, so we are going to kick off our panel, and I'd like to do an intro of our moderator. So, as Roger said, we decided we wanted to do our first event in Atlanta. We think this is a great, really growing city, big procurement community, and the first person that came to my mind to moderate was Crystal. I had the privilege of moderating a Women in Procurement panel at the Zycus conference in November, and she was on my panel, so we got to spend a few days together. And I just thought she has the perfect personality and background to moderate. She's really fun and energetic. So she spent about 30 years in procurement. Most of her time was spent at Coca-Cola and Porsche. She left Porsche, went to Coke, and came back to Porsche. She was one of the first employees at Porsche in the procurement team. I think there was 2 or 3 of you to start. And then when she left, she was running the entire procurement organization. And she made a huge career change about 4 weeks ago, and she left her role running all of procurement at Porsche to start her own company. So I want to give her a big round of applause and welcoming her. To the world of entrepreneurship. It's a big deal. Her company does leadership development, and she actually published an international best-selling book last year. It's about networking. So feel free to connect with her if you want to learn more about her book. It's available on Amazon. I ordered my copy this weekend, so hopefully when I get back home, I'll be able to read it. But with that, I'd like to welcome Crystal. She's going to introduce the panelists and thank the sponsors, and then we're going to have a really fun, interactive discussion. I do want to note that this is being live streamed globally, so we have people participating all over the world. Caroline will be fielding all the questions that come in and asking those to the panel. And then after, we will have a video that we'll share with all of you that you can share with your colleagues to provide all of the information to our community for those who weren't able to join us. So with that, again, let's hand it off to Crystal.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? Good, good. Isn't this a lovely venue that Roger selected? It's wonderful. And tonight we're here to discuss procurement, nightmares, and train wrecks. And I think Roger and Sarah came up with the title while you were sitting here, because we're right across from the MARTA train line and from the Amtrak. And our lovely panelists tonight are all drinking wine, so we might get some really good stories. I'm excited. So I want to thank the sponsors tonight. Thank Sarah for pulling this together. So Roger and Senatrade, thank you so much. And again, they're a leading global provider of e-procurement systems. And then we have HPP, High Performance Procurement. They are a leading supplier of supplier development services. So if you're a CPO looking to increase the reliability and sustainability of your supply base, contact High Performance Procurement, HPP. TechVision provides unique portfolio, innovative capabilities that seamlessly combine client insights, strategy, design software engineering, and systems integration. And then we have Worldwide Services. I know there's some Worldwide Services in there. All right, perfect. They are a global provider of managed IT services. And for the past 15 years, they've been providing third-party maintenance, professional services, hardware, you, Cheryl, if you could just give us a brief overview of your procurement history.
Sure. So my name's Cheryl Katz, and I've been in procurement and supply chain space for eons. Done everything from purchasing textiles in China to purchasing electronic components. I'm now a part of an organization called Synovus Financial Corporation, which you may have seen the big red banks on many corners. They're growing up all the time around in this area particularly. And I'm very, very happy to be with Synovus. It's a very fast-growing company. So I've been around the gamut. Today I work as a director of strategic sourcing, and my particular area of expertise is IT and technology. And I am very excited to be a part of this panel with this group of people.
Thank you, Cheryl. Cheryl, how have you seen procurement change in like the last 5 to 10 years since you've been around for so long?
So basically, I think that let's say 10 years ago, purchasing people bought things. Okay, we weren't quite as worried about risk. We weren't quite as worried about a lot of the things that we look into today very deeply. And our only goal, or our chief goal, if we were going to keep our jobs, basically, to be fair, was to save the company money, to buy whatever we were buying at the least possible cost to the company, and in some cases within a certain budget. If we fast forward to today, and I know I've gone past the 5-year mark in the middle, but if we fast forward to today, we're in a very, very different world, which we probably were in some way 5 years ago even. And that is, we have to look at the suppliers we're working with more carefully. We have to look at the people we're working with more carefully. We have to look at the product and the services that we're buying and make sure that we're getting what we pay for and that we contract for what we want. We have to listen more carefully. What we hear needs to be confirmed and contracted for. And it's a very different world. And now as we fast forward even to where we're going next, and some of us are already on our way there, everything's going into some place we call the cloud. You know, I see this thing up here. It's like a cloud. And we don't know where it is or what's happening to it, so we have to be very, very careful of what we're putting up there, how we're protecting it, who we're trusting with that protection. And a lot more is changing at a much faster pace, so we need to move with it.
How has that affected the talent in the procurement space? Because that's a lot of change, right? It's a different profile of a person that's just doing sourcing and trying to save money, right? Versus mitigating risk and, all those things that you just talked about.
So I would say that young people coming into the field now have more opportunity, and hopefully you're taking advantage of the opportunity to have the education in the field. Most of us that started when I started really started as maybe I'll try that kind of thing, and we learned as we went. And those of us that are still in it are still in it because we value education, and we value learning, and we understand the need to stay at the edge of our field. And so basically that's it. It's about continuing to learn, continuing to grow.
Perfect. Thank you, Cheryl. Deb, can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Hi, I'm Deb. I got into procurement on accident about 25 years ago. I was in sales. I've been hired by a company called R. Donnelly to manage this little pine.
Yeah,
they had
printing
called
industry.
And Donnelly realized very quickly that they got into the fulfillment business. That was sales doesn't really help me now. I was an only child. And I was, you know, I was a little brat. I always wanted to have my own way. I'd be the pitch and the fit, manipulating my way until I got exactly what I wanted. And then I grew up and realized that in your interpersonal relationships, it's really not a good way to do it. So I went to therapy. To fix that. But I had this, you know, unrequited part of me that still needed to like have my own way and get what I wanted, and I discovered that as a procurement person, all those things that make me like the worst wife or the worst whatever on the planet, make me the best sourcing person you've ever met. So
Anybody here ever negotiated with Dad?
You might wanna run the other way.
Exactly. Thank you,
Nah,
Dad. Thank you. Alicia Wallman, can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. My name is Alicia Waldman. I am, I guess I'm a transplant. I've lived in the Atlanta area for about 11 years, but from what I understand, everybody in Atlanta is a transplant, so I don't feel too bad. I've been in procurement. This is my 22nd year. Like all of us and the rest of the panel kind of fell into it. I was working in the finance department for Sarah Lee in North Carolina. Very quickly, Sarah Lee owned a branded apparel division that owned Hanes, Champion, Playtex, Just My Size, all that stuff, and that was based in North Carolina. That's where I worked for. Was getting ready to finish school and noticed that there was a position open in sourcing. The role that I had in finance, I managed the funds for the distribution centers. And I figured that I already saw the back end of the distribution side being a cost analyst, that I'd go learn the other side working in sourcing. So I applied for the role and I got it. That was back in 2000. It was, yeah, about 2000. It was back in 2000. I've been in sourcing ever since. I have worked for textile companies. I've worked for pharmaceutical companies. I've worked for a fine paper and packaging company. I've worked for just a packaging company, an IT company, and right now I work for CRH, which used to be Old Castle, if any of you are from here and familiar with them. But CRH is the largest construction materials company in North America and the second largest in the world. And I am in charge of professional services, or what we call indirect spend, for all of North America for CRH.
Wow. So Alicia, you have had a vast experience, as have all the panels, on different categories. And
Yes.
you've been on the direct side and indirect.
Yes.
Which one do you prefer?
Oh, wow, okay. So the INTJ in me loves the direct side. Because everything makes sense, there's forecasts, there's gardeners, it's awesome. But I have to say that I have actually enjoyed the journey down the indirect path the most. Indirect has just now, and when I say just now, maybe in the past 35 years, come into its own where companies are recognizing it as real spend that deserves strategic attention, which I've always found strange because it's bottom line real money, but that's, I'm segueing, but glad you're at the party now. But anyway, I enjoy indirect the most, just because that fight is still there, that battle is still there. We're still trying to make indirect a relevant piece of procurement to discuss when you get the seat at the table. So if you have indirect, it's not just about getting the seat. Once you get there, you've got to make sure that someone's listening to you. And I'm enjoying being part of the team, part of the industry that's giving indirect spend its voice.
That's awesome. What do you think is one of the skills that a category manager has to develop on the indirect side, that's specific to indirect?
You have to learn, well, you have to accept that you are literally negotiating 24/7 and learn how to do it appropriately. Because you're not only negotiating with your suppliers, you're also negotiating internally, not only with your stakeholders, but sometimes your boss. And I say that because in the indirect space, the least expensive supplier is not always the best one. and it's your job to make sure that you're getting value. So sometimes that value is the middle person, or sometimes it's the most expensive person. And if all of your colleagues are in direct, have some piece of direct spend, and you're the only person in indirect, you're sitting there looking at your CPO like, hi, this really makes sense, but I'm gonna need 5 minutes. But I think that that's the biggest skill, is being able to balance and recognize when you're having those conversations, when it's time to have them, and how to make sure that you're pitching the right pitch to the correct audience.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alicia. Yes,
I'm just gonna add a little commentary. ISM is doing their first indirect only focus conference in Pittsburgh in June of this year.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so again,
I hear it.
although you're starting to see direct only focused events as well too that are specific
right.
too, but yeah, this is the first time that ISM said they have a full track in Boston that is just indirect. So they got that happening this year, but also there's the specific event in Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh in June is a really nice time. It's the only nice time to do it, actually.
Exactly. No, that's good. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, the only esteemed gentleman on our panel.
I like esteemed, I like that.
George Tuggle, can you introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Sure, my name is George Tuggle. I work for a company called Rollins, and I've been in the procurement space for 18 to 20 years. Like everyone else, I accidentally got into procurement from my undergraduate and what I was doing the first few years of my life. And it's funny because the transformation to go from engineering to procurement was actually very easy for me. Because one, the reason why I stopped being an engineer is because I worked for a company that was up in Rochester, New York.
That's where I'm from.
You're from Rochester? So I used to work for Xerox. That was my
My
first.
mom retired from Kodak.
Oh, okay, there we go.
Those are the only two companies
Those
in
only two
Rochester.
companies, yeah. My brother used to work for Kodak, but he was in Texas. And so one day, I was walking around the manufacturing plant, and someone had a picture of, they took a sheet of notebook paper, and they drew this picture of a penguin. And they put a pocket protector on it, right? And I was like, that's pretty interesting. I looked at the penguin. I walked around the facility, and every engineer that had been there, 15 to 20 years looked exactly like the penguin. So I decided I was going to go to grad school and not be an engineer. But oddly enough, I came out of grad school and I went back into engineering, but I was at GE. And that's why I made the transformation from engineering to sourcing. And at GE, all you need to do was express a desire to do something, and they'll let you sink or swim. It could be something you're totally not. That's the one company that I've ever worked for where you can do whatever you want to do. You will sink or swim, but they will allow you to do it. And I just happened to be in the office one day having a conversation at like my yearly meeting with the HR director, and he says, George, you've been here about a year. What do you want to do next? The individual I reported to had the engineering group and had the sourcing group. Now, the engineering group was a whole bunch of old guys, and the sourcing group were people that they would come in and they would talk about beating up suppliers and all this negotiating and all this back and forth, and they just seemed animated about it. And that was GE, they like to beat up suppliers. And so I said, well, they do some pretty interesting things in sourcing, I wouldn't mind giving that a try. Totally made nothing of the conversation. A month later, the org chart came out. I was a global sourcing leader. They sent me to Crystal New York to take a couple classes. I came back, you got it. That's how I got into sourcing. So I actually started sourcing some of I worked at the magnet plant. It was GE Medical Systems back then, it became GE Healthcare. And we built magnets for MRIs. So I was actually sourcing magnet parts for them. And eventually got here to Atlanta about 20 years ago at Delta. And then I made myself up to Home Depot for about 3 years. Did a little selling for about 3 years. So I got the sales side, and then I've been with Rollins for the last 8 years or so. And I managed the indirect one.
So what are some of the transferable skills from engineering that you took over to sourcing?
Analysis. taking a situation is almost like doing a Harvard business case. You take all the facts, you get the numbers, you understand the environment of which your company is working in. So I've worked for multinational companies, and although Rollins is one of the largest pest control companies in the world, it's still a small company. But they are more on culture, and they are made up of 600-700 branches between all the brands, and they all are their own profit and loss centers. So we want them concentrating on the customer, and that means that any supplier in which we need them to manage everything, because we only want our branches and all the salespeople and all the technicians concentrating on the customers. So in that case, we don't always go. The solution we have is not always the cheapest supplier. It's the supplier that can actually best fit our environment at the most efficient thing. So being able to understand that when I first got to Rollins, it's the same thing you do with any type of engineering project you work on. You gotta take in the information, make the right analysis, and then move forward. And I found that was a very transferable skill.
That's good.
Well, did you discover that there's a concept in engineering called design for manufacturability? Right?
Yes.
So you design your part to be manufactured. You design a great part, but you can't make it.
Yeah.
Right?
That's nothing.
And the same thing with procurement. You can negotiate a great deal, but if you can't implement it, if you ground a supplier into the ground and they won't pick up the phone at 5 o'clock on Friday when your line went down, then you didn't really get a great deal. So that, to me, that's a concept that's transferable from design for manufacturability to negotiate the implementation with that idea that you want to implement this ultimately, not just get the lowest price or the quickest turnaround.
That's a good point.
Good point. So now that we've got all the niceties and the pleasantries out of the way, let's talk about those nightmares.
That's a hard question.
Because what I've learned is it's the same stuff, different companies, right? We all in the procurement world experience the same things. It's just a different company. So let's get into the gory details. So Cheryl, have you ever had an opportunity where you did all the work, you sourced, you found the best supplier, and it kind of stalled out? Nothing happened.
Absolutely, I think we've all had those situations. I've had them numerous times at every company I've ever worked at. And a lot of what that is about is getting the right people in the room, knowing who the right people are that need to be involved in the conversation way early on, so that decisions are made and directions are selected based upon the whole group of people that are involved, or that will be involved, or that could be involved, or that might not be listening to you today, but then the day that contract needs to be signed, or that check needs to be written, or that project needs to start, all of a sudden they become very loud. And so you have to be listening to the folks that you're working with, whatever your category is. You have to be listening very carefully to what they need, to what they want, and then that you have to find out who else will be touched by that. What are the dependencies across the company, across related companies, maybe even related to the supplier, but who is involved in that decision, and then make sure they're all in the game and they're all in the business case and they're all on board before you go for any kind of final approval or final execution or begin any kind of a project.
Do you do that?
Listen and then do.
Do you do it with a core team? Like, do you put together a core team?
You can do it with a cross-functional team. You have to make sure, again, that all the right players are in the game. And they may not show up, okay? And if they choose not to show up, you have to find a way to communicate to them, because they can still be a problem later on. And so you just have to make sure that you're inviting, that you're including, and that you're communicating, and communicating in a way that shows value. And the difference in my mind between value and savings, the old savings days that I mentioned earlier, is listening. How do you know what your stakeholder considers to be of value?
How important is influence?
Very important.
Yeah.
Very important. So there was a project that we had. I had sourced this category 5 years prior to it, and when I sourced it, there were a lot of new players in this IT arena. The main project leader had left the company, but from the procurement side, I went ahead and finished out the project. Well, once we got to the end of the project, we selected the supplier, we had signed the contract, the executive over that space said, oh, well, this is not an issue, procurement owns it. Or procurement's not supposed to manage any space, right? That's the business owner. So I ended up having to own that for 5 years, okay?
Wow.
All right, it ran smoothly, right? I did a good job. Well, a new VP came in that I reported up to, and he was like, none of that. So when we actually sourced it again, another individual was sourcing it that was on the team. But they had already crafted that they had a solution in place. We were using a consultant, and there was a consulting partner, and we were gonna use that partner. So as all of the companies, because I own the space, all the competitors were reaching out to me, hey, we wanna get an opportunity to bid in the space. I let them know, we're not gonna bid this out. I don't own it anymore. The business owners are gonna go this direction. Every single manufacturer, kind of almost said the space, accepted, except for one. And that was the incumbent that had it when they lost the business when I did the project 5 years ago. And that was a key reason, they had some service issues. But none of those people in IT were still around. And so they went to the executive level.
The supplier.
The supplier went to the executive level. Then all of a sudden, we had to include them and competitively look at this, although it was not an RFP. It was still just them and maybe 2 others. So they were very good. They brought in all their good-looking people to present. Yeah, they did their study, and it was all good. And the company that we were looking at, they didn't do so well. Now, this whole time, my influence, I kept telling the team, hey, there's a reason why we didn't select in the first place. There were some service issues. There was this, but they had already seemed to make up their mind and buy what this supplier was going to do. So anyway, to make a long story short, we ended up selecting them, right? And they were supposed to go through this implementation process. We're going to start, let's just say, it started in late fall. They were going to be done by midwinter and then go live, right? By midwinter, me and my boss had a meeting with the business owners, and they needed a contingency plan because that supplier was failing miserably, and they needed to go to RFP. So now we were going to do an RFP that we didn't do, and now I can include the incumbent that we should have included in the first place. Ended up the incumbent that had it before won it because they knew the space, and so we wasted about 2 years simply because they weren't listening to. I needed to find another way of influencing that team because I knew the end result. But they just did their thing, and because a supplier goes behind your back and then fails miserably at the executive level, that is like a train wreck.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened.
Oh, that's a good point. And I think we've all experienced where the suppliers sometimes have more influence than procurement, right? Internally. Deb, have you ever had a situation where you felt like you were negotiating against your own team internally when sitting with a supplier?
Yeah, I worked for a distribution company a while back in this day, so this was before 2000. And we're all trained as professional procurement people that, hands off, we don't go to lunch. I mean, I don't even go to lunch with people, you know what I mean? You don't take pitch, I donate all those Christmas baskets to the homeless side on the street, right? Well, in distribution it's a different kind of problem. And these guys, there's a big tape manufacturer whose name you would know immediately, who owns a private jet. Used to fly our sales reps all around like all over the day. They take them golfing. They had the president of the company would have this 1 month long meeting in Denver and Vail and all the heads of all these big giant companies that you would recognize their name brands would come and visit. And so these guys, the suppliers there you are, trying to do the right thing, get the right price, and they're like, yeah, I already talked to Tom, we're good, I don't need it. We're good. My prices are great, and you're like, your deliveries are terrible, your mins are too high, your prices are not competitive. But they're like, yeah, no, just call that guy, we're good. You know, so yeah, it can be really frustrating. So you have to get very creative when you're trying to, kind of negotiate with, your boss's boss. And, implement something that's really good. Ultimately, for your boss's boss, when he goes in front of the board, he can't explain why, costs haven't gone down for 2 years. And his, entertainment budget is twice what it should be.
Exactly.
You're trying to use reason?
Right.
Sometimes you just have to, go behind your back.
Alicia, I know you've had some experience on the HR side. How are the HR stakeholders bringing you in and making sure that you're involved in the decision making?
Oh goodness. To be fair, it depends on the maturity of the sourcing and procurement department. If the department already exists and they're used to it, not too bad. The situation I had, similar to the job that I have now, the company's going through a procurement transformation, set up new teams. Company I worked for previously was a technology company. Again, procurement transformation. What they did was took the sourcing team and divided the entire direct sourcing team from the indirect sourcing team. We even had 2 different VPs that reported up into the CPO. I was to create the category management development for professional services, which included HR. I decided I was gonna tackle temporary labor first. Markups were all over the place, 5,000 contracts all over the place. I really thought it would be a really quick, easy win. HR would be happy, the hiring managers would be happy, and y'all were laughing because you know how this story goes.
Research it before.
Oh, God. So, and keep in mind that the company that I left before I took this job I'm telling you about, I was working for a fine paper company where I had half direct, half indirect, but the majority of my time was spent purchasing derivatives of petrochemicals. So when I took this job on the indirect side, it began trying to create relationships and influence my HR VPs and my hiring managers. I sent them an email worded like a person from the direct side of sourcing would word it. Hi, my name is Alicia. It's nice to meet you. I'm your new director of temporary services. I would like to meet with you to discuss your budget from last year. I am available these days, these times, which one works for you? Needless to say, I didn't hear from a damn soul. Except one person that did write back and say, okay, with a question mark, and that was literally all he said in the email. So, what ended up happening there is one of the other commodities I had was IT. And I was working on a project on the IT side that was going to require a consultant. So I was working with the vice president of IT on the RFP for the consultant agency that we were going to use for this IT project that we had going on. Mentioned to him that I could also assist with contingent labor. A couple of months went by, he tapped back into me. I helped him, he let HR know, and so I accidentally ended up being able to build relationships and influence with the people that I caused my own train wreck by really by not taking the time to be aware of where I was, what the environment was, and the difference between where I was now and what I left. But I was able to use the IT project as leverage to help me get back in the door on the temp labor side.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
It's awesome now. It was
Yeah.
painful.
Yeah, it sounds like it. That temp labor space is woo. Okay. And Cheryl, you had a similar experience. Tell us about the UFCs you had to identify. Help us to understand what UFCs are.
So UFC is an unidentified flying contractor.
Okay.
So, similar situation in that we were a procurement department. I was new to the organization, in the telecom space, a large player in the telecom space. And, I had helped them with some smaller projects, save some money, get some contracts in place. And they said, okay, so let us help us address our biggest problem. And I said, sure, what is that? Had no idea what was going on. What ended up happening is that they wanted me to help them save money on contract labor, specifically in IT. So in IT, I went down into the space where they all were, and the contractors, the owners of the contracting companies, were walking around in the halls selling services. No problem at all, no problem. So I went in and I said, okay, so I'm gonna do this the way I've done everything else. Went in and talked to the managers. Who are your contractors and what are they doing? I don't know. Go ask him. And they pointed to the guy who ran the company. They had no idea, and this went on and on and on and on and on. So I'm thinking somebody has to organize this, and I'm trying to find somebody who's doing it and no one is. So I go up and I meet with the analysts in finance and ask someone to help me. Well, let me just tell you, don't ever try to organize 425 contractors whose managers don't know what they're doing on a spreadsheet. That's what they were trying to do. It's not possible. Trainwreck is not even a close enough word to what that is. So I did a little research, and so we managed it on paper, on spreadsheets for a little while. We got nowhere. We couldn't get rid of anybody. The guys were still walking in the hallways, trying to take me out for some golf or some whatever. And what ended up happening is I did some research and I found out that there were tools to manage these things. VMS tools and MSPs. Does everybody know what those are?
Yes.
Okay, so I did some research. I did some demos with 7 different companies who have tools, because we didn't have anything, okay? And I also found out, and we didn't have any budget for this, by the way. Everybody told me I was crazy.
Of course not.
Everybody told me I was crazy. Talk about not having an influence on anybody. They were like, you're crazy. But I found out that you can do these programs on a supplier-funded basis. No money. Okay, and so I put together a program, and we implemented it, and I'm making it short. It's not easy, it's not short, but we don't have a lot of time. Okay, we implemented it. We went through some bumps and bruises on somebody defining, because the IT people don't know what they need. The IT people don't know what they need to set up at the time. So we had to define what we wanted the program to do, and nobody could tell me what to do with that. So it was a bit challenging, but we got it done. And we had to make some changes later, but it was okay. What ended up happening once we got the program implemented was we went from, in very short order, by design, the program does not allow contractors management to walk around the halls. First of all, I did have the influencers able to push down and have that not happen anymore. Badges were revoked, limited badges were issued to those that needed to have them, and that happened right away. We went from 425 contractors to 125 in a matter of months. Millions of dollars of savings, but there was another train wreck in there. We weren't done. I did not listen to the people who were the experts when they told me that I needed to hire an MSP to manage this program for me. Oh no, that will cost money. That will mean we won't have a supplier-funded program anymore, and I won't be able to sell it to anybody. And so me, and my department that I had 8 people on 8 categories. Okay, I didn't have a whole lot of extra weight there. Managed this entire program with now 125 contractors. Eventually, we added statement of work as well. And it was a disaster. It was so difficult to manage. We didn't lose control of the 425 to 125, but it was a full-time job for more than one of us. I would tell you, listen to the people who are the experts, and if you're not an expert at something, don't try to be that expert. Hire the MSP.
Yeah, those are great points, and My personal philosophy, like with the supplier funded programs, is inevitably those costs come right back through the supplier pricing. What are your thoughts on that?
What I found, okay, that is the initial response, and in fact, the suppliers don't like the program, so they're gonna tell all of those, before they got out of the aisles, they made sure to tell all the management and IT, that that was gonna happen and all their prices were gonna go up. But that is another benefit of good management on your program, because you set rules and you set regulations, and when you know what you're doing, you know what rules to set. And it's just like with anything else that you do an RFP for, or you're considering multiple vendors, okay, you will consider those vendors that do follow your rule and do not raise those prices, and include it as a cost of doing business, because now they're going to have, of your 125, which grew as we grew, I mean, it became more than 125, naturally. So would you wanna have 100 of those be your resources? Then you follow our rules. And that's how it happens.
Awesome. So on the direct side, one of the possible train wrecks are sole source and single source, right? Deb, have you had some experience with the sole sources and single sources on the direct side? And how do you manage the possible train wrecks there?
Yeah, that's tough, right, when you have something you're gonna buy and there's like one guy who always you do your Porter's 5 forces and you're like, no, that's it. So you get creative. I had a client a couple years ago that was buying lids for big 5-gallon pails. And the lids had a particular venting device in them and a childproof safety latch on. And the guy that sells those lids patented that device, obviously. And then the guy is super smart. He bought all his competition, the ones he couldn't buy. He takes his initial patent, that's brilliant, and then he defeats it, right? He spends all this time thinking, all right, I'm this smart guy down the street, so look at my patent. And they're gonna tweak it, so they get their own patent, and he puts like a fence of 20 patents around his initial patent, right? And so there's just no way of getting at it. So he's effectively the only guy in the whole country that can sell this, and virtually every person that wants to put this particular chemical in the bucket buys those lids from him at like $10 a piece, because he can charge that. The lid costs him 50 cents to hold. So there we are. I'm in this customer who's gonna, that's their biggest spend. We split it on, and my employers promised them a 10% savings. So I'm like, all right, it's a thing. The USPTO, the patent office, my favorite place to stop. We go do all your searches. You find out who owns a trademark. Somebody told you something you never heard. You go look up the trademark and see who that supplier is. So I'm looking up this guy's patents and seeing that he's like put this huge fence around him. So the only thing to do is to look at his earliest patent that had run, and basically go back and say, because once the patent's run, the design's there. So we walk into the room and say, this is a good product. My guy likes it, but my guy used to buy your product 20 years ago, and it's just as good. Like, you've improved it and they go along with it because they like it, but honestly, the first one works. So I've got this injection molded down the street, and I've got your design, thank you very much, and we're just implementing it now. And so the guy was like flabbergasted, like, but this is so much better. No, it is better, but this one works. And this one will cost 50 cents. And so, my job is to save this guy money, and, they're not gonna pay $10 anymore. So if you wanna give us a reasonable price, we'll keep buying this good. Otherwise, thank you for the design, we're gonna reduce your old one. So, it's kind of hardball, right? It worked. Got a great price on the lids, and, the guy, made us, the contract has us like, I'm supposed to talk about it.
Until tonight.
What happens in this room stays in this room. This is Vegas, yes.
No, that NDA ran. But my point is, it's, you can get creative. Anytime you've got a sole
one nugget of advice, like one sentence nugget of advice, and I'll start with George.
I think I was missing this a couple of people tonight. One of the things you can do is, even though you're in the procurement sourcing space, the first thing you really need to do is build a relationship with your customers or your business partner. Because if you have a sponsor, if you're in procurement, you have a CPO, you know, that's only covered for a little time. But to have ongoing projects, you really need to build a rapport, a relationship, and get the respect from them, not just as a procurement person, but as a person that's part of the same company. And I found that as difficult as it was to get into certain spaces at my current company, and it's resistant because indirect sourcing did not exist before I started there, with the exception for about a few months that my boss had. But I was able to, I came in wanting to be part of a team as opposed to telling them about the sourcing and I'm going to lead them through it. And so I've been able to sustain those relationships and work on projects that I never probably thought I would be able to do because they actually like and trust me. And that's just putting things in perspective. I have a job to do, but I also got a work life. And so if you build that rapport, you could go places you probably would think you would go to.
Thank you, George. Alicia.
I would say the biggest piece of advice I would leave for anyone, it's from a negotiation perspective, mostly for indirect, but probably applicable to direct as well. Look for what I call those intangible items or things that you can ask for from your supplier to put into your contract to make the contract more long-term, and not just the contract, but the relationship. I listened to Deb share her story a few moments ago. I've seen something similar to that several times, and in the indirect space, it gets even more hazy because we're negotiating and buying ideas and concepts that someone's had. It's something we can't put our fingers on. So what you want to try to do, or at least what I try to do, is to negotiate a contract that has a value proposition in it. So we're getting this idea, these are the marketing verticals, this is the price, this is how much we're paying for the website, and in addition to that, we will X, Y, and Z. Just look for those opportunities that don't necessarily translate to ROI, but will strengthen the relationship for the key stakeholder that you're negotiating for, and then try to wrap it up and get it in the contract to make sure that it actually implements.
Awesome. Thank you. Deb.
I'll give you really specific advice on packaging. So instead of general procurement, I'll tell you for packaging. Look at, probably your data, like everybody's data is not great. But if you can, try to make sure your data gets reduced to the common unit of measure. So any packaging that's made out of plastic, the common unit of measure would be pound. Because plastic packaging is essentially, you can reduce it to cost per pound. And paper, do the same thing. And then you can index it. You can look at CVI, you can look at IHBS, you can look at open paper. But you can, if you do that, it's hard when you're saying, oh, we got this box here, we got that box there. They're all different sizes, they're different weights. How are you going to figure out if you pay a good price for this one and not on that? It's like corrugate, common unit measure, BMSF. So if you do that, if you get all your stuff together and reduce it to the common unit measure, you can see where your outliers are. You can see where you're paying like way too little, never talk to your supplier about that. And then, way too much, go beat them up for those. That would be my advice.
Thank you. And Cheryl.
I'm actually gonna go in a bit of a different direction here, and I'm gonna jump off of something that George said. We're in a business of relationships. And as such, we need to network with each other. We need to listen to those around us. And we need to continue learning every single day we do our jobs.
Thank you. So, I want to thank the panel. I think they all did a phenomenal job for their first time on the panel.
So question, I guess this is more indirect focus, which is most people on the group. Just curious, how many of you take the time to survey your stakeholders at the conclusion of an engagement, particularly if you manage a team and want to find out their satisfaction with them? And then how often do you then survey their satisfaction with the provider that you potentially brought in to switch an incumbent? So it's a best practice that I'm seeing that's happening a lot. I'm just curious if anybody on the panel is starting to do that, or at least thinking about doing that. So 2 parts. Hey, how did my team perform for you? You happy with the work they did? Second is, how do you like who we picked? And how are they performing for you?
So, I am the team.
Right.
I manage all the areas, and that's it. But I also do supplier management after any engagement. So I am actually leading the quarterly business reviews and making sure that they are hitting metrics for the business partner. So it's like, no, I don't own the relationship, but I manage how they're actually doing it. That's like an ongoing basis. Like you have 2 QBRs tomorrow.
Right.
And so it's an ongoing process, and I actually get a sense of who's happy and who's not with a certain supplier. And actually, whenever we actually go through the entire procurement process and strategic sourcing, they always seem to be happy with those. When they take some shortcuts and not finish out the process, they seem to be unhappy with those. It's been pretty interesting how that works.
I only worked for one company that literally actually did do a survey process, such as the one that you described. And I actually liked it. It worked out great. We got lots of feedback, and we as a team were able to find and discover areas for opportunity and development that worked out really great. The company I work for now, we don't do that, but again, we are literally brand spanking new. I don't think the team has been there a year yet. We're all brand new. For the perspective of following up with my key stakeholders, the way that I run my indirect projects, even if we do have an RFP, we go to RFP, we get the results back, my stakeholder and I select the vendor together. There's never, and I just, in indirect, I really don't see that there's any other way that it can be done and be successful. So we do it together, so there's never a situation where a manager or a VP would call me and say, Alicia, I don't like this supplier you picked. We go through that process together and we align together so that piece is already taken care of. Like George, I'm the one that handles all the QBRs. Most of the companies I've worked for, sourcing would handle those anyway.
Sure.
And then I choose to touch base. I would say probably around QBR time, and depending on the commodity and the stakeholder, sometimes I let them join me in QBRs.
Sure. But do you ask them their happiness with that supplier as part of the QBR? Good.
Well, prior to the QBR,
Yeah,
but
prior to, yeah.
Somehow if they're unhappy, we're gonna know about it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, we'll
I just find they like being asked
exactly
on a regular basis. Some of our better customers, let's say they move from Granger to Fastenal, right? And they implement that change. Through our technology, we will survey every plant that is using Fastenal.
Right.
So when you have that QBR, you have a roll-up of 40 different plants, and 35 are really happy, but you got a problem with these 5 plants over here. And so I'm seeing that as a pretty regular roll-up into the QBR process is stakeholder satisfaction at the stakeholder level as well as at the plant level where rubber hits the road. Yeah.
So Caroline, do we have any questions from live stream? Okay, I want you all to wave at the people on live stream. We don't want to forget about them.
I have a question.
It's a great restaurant, by the way. I eat here all the time.
I have a question for you. You're a one-man show. How do you find time to innovate and stay current on trends?
Very good. So that's a good question because not only do, I handle indirect. I have a counterpart that handles direct, and direct for us is chemicals, and then tooling to apply to all our customer sites. But then we also do field support. So just her and I, we field support, and we also, today we utilize Ariba. So we also are the caretakers of Ariba. So essentially, with the one exception of beginning of the year doing a spend analytics of what we're gonna handle, that's when I get an idea of what I'm gonna source. But then when it's at the time that I'm getting ready to source it is when I actually am able to see what's the latest, you know, how's it evolved since we last sourced it. So it's almost at RP time is when I get a chance to do it, because there's no free time to do it otherwise.
One last question? Anybody? Yes.
What about, I heard a lot what you guys do is the art of what you do. But what about the evolution of the systems that support what you do after you make your decision, right? So whether it's SAP, whether it's homegrown systems, whether it's next generation RPA, AI, machine learning, do you guys have points of view on any of that?
Not a big fan of SAP.
You know, we've been using Ariba for, see, I've been there almost 8 years, so probably about 6.5 years. We've noticed some things when it comes to, you know, Ariba is the first big mover, but they're also somewhat of a dinosaur. And so some of those nimble things that you need, they're very resistant to do, or it takes forever to do. And we're finding as an organization, because we had nothing prior, that this whole source to pay thing, and because we have all these locations, it's actually a pretty good thing to utilize. And I think our executives are beginning to appreciate it more. And so now, when it comes up again, we're going to be looking for something that's even, you know, more nimble and can modify itself to fit what we need. And that may not be the current systems, but we are continuing to upgrade all of our systems. We have a new HRIS system. We had none previously. That seems to be working. People seem to get appreciation. So once we continue to get exposed to it, we're finding that it benefits us. Of course, from a sourcing piece, we already do that, but now the company is able to do it.
I'm just gonna. The velocity of the business then.
Yeah.
Is getting faster.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So I worked at Ariba. I actually built, from a product management perspective, all their upstream product. It was actually called Free Markets way back in the day. Way back in the day. And what's interesting is I get RFPs from Ariba now to replace Ariba, meaning, hey, we're looking for a new tool to replace our current tool. And it's coming out of Ariba, and what scares me the most, if I was Ariba, is the product hasn't changed since I worked on it 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And if you haven't seen it yet, the Forrester Wave report just came out and for P2P, and they dropped to the bottom. They dropped to what's called follower, which is the bottom. They fired half of their product management team over that, but it really wasn't that product management team's fault. It was SAP's fault for actually not investing, staying nimble. So when I was there, and I loved it when we were not part of SAP, we were fast, we were nimble, we were innovative, we were growing fast. But I left once we became part of SAP because we knew that's where products go to die sometimes, and that's where we actually have our customers come from unhappy Ariba customers. So there's a 10,000-pound gorilla in the space, but they are acting like it as well too.
I implemented a full P2P system at Porsche before leaving, and all in one tool. And I would tell you that user interface is so critical because consumers, you know, we're doing everything online now, and the system should act like Amazon. It should act like Google. You know, it should be user friendly, and what'd you say? Intuitive, exactly. And that's the biggest feedback I would get on different tools from our internal stakeholders. Is why does it do this instead of this? And you know, why is that I click here on this screen and I click here on that screen, and why, you know, it's just not intuitive. It should know these things. So I think that's the biggest evolution on the tool side. We need to get more user friendly because procurement with Porsche, we changed the way Porsche did business with our P2P system. We were able to influence the entire business because of what we did in procurement. Finance changed the way they did things, and it affected legal, and it affected, you know, all IT security. So we were able to change the way everybody did things because of the influence of the procurement tool. So it was critical that we had something that was user friendly.
Crystal, can you tell us what that application was?
Yeah, we use Zycus.
Oh, okay.
That's
Yeah.
the best thing I've
Yeah,
ever used.
they-
I can't believe a German
Yeah.
company used something besides SAP.
Oh
That's
my
really
God.
impressive.
Because SAP is so expensive,
Yeah.
and it's so hard to change, and everything, and you know, we had, the SAP HANA in the roadmap, but it takes so long to do anything, especially when our counterparts in Germany are leading the way. So we were able to get the approval to do a little special trial here in North America
Nice.
with Zygus, and we selected Zygus, and it changed the game.
Yep. I get to see grading sheets, so when we win business at Intertrade or lose business, we get to see the grading sheet of how we performed. And definitely, to follow up your point, the number one thing that people put as number one on their grading sheet in terms of importance is usability.
Yep.
And then what we're starting to see, and I'd recommend anybody that is evaluating tools, ask for a trial run. All of us providers will give you an opportunity to get your hands on technology, so don't be afraid to ask for a sandbox environment or a test environment or even a one-day workshop where our vendors will come in and at least we'll watch you use some use cases and some test scripts, because before you spend hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, you need to make sure there's not organ rejection, right? And it'll happen solely because I can't figure out how to use it.
And don't just have procurement people do
Oh, no,
it.
no, no, no,
And
no, no,
it's
no.
sandbox.
No, 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 no.
Make sure you have your marketing
No.
people, your HR people, make sure
Finance,
you have people who are
AP, yeah.
make sure you have the actual users involved.
Absolutely.
All right, so we are over time.
Oh.
I want to give a big round of applause for As you can see, they're all very fun and lively and friendly, so feel free to come up to them after with questions, connect with them on LinkedIn. They're a great source of knowledge and information. As Roger mentioned, our next event is in New York, so if you are planning to go to New York next month and want to attend our next procurement talk, we'd love to have you. We're doing 5 throughout the year, so we have a couple more. Chicago, Miami, and Toronto are on the books for the end of the year as well. I would like to ask all of the sponsors to come up on stage with the panelists so we can